You're listening to the Cryptid Creature Show. If you're a fan of the show, go and check out our new Patreon site. You'll get access to our private Discord server, exclusive merchandise, access to all live streams and Q&As, discounts on merch from the Cryptid Creature store, and get a chance to be a guest host during one of the show's recordings. Just go to www.patreon.com/cryptidcreatures. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. This is the Cryptid Creatures Podcast. I am Brian, and with me as always is my co-host Todd. What's up, buddy?
Hello, Brian. Hello, listeners. We got a interesting episode tonight. We've actually been requested to do this by a couple of our listeners have hit us up about this. We're going to talk about the Dyatlov Pass incident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. That's an exciting one.
It is.
That's the one that's got me stumped.
Yeah. We've talked about this back and forth for a while now and talking about doing it, and it's really interesting. Basically, what is the Dyatlov Pass, people say? If you don't know, it's about a bunch of Russian students, maybe, who went on a hiking
College
trek
students, yep.
up in the mountains there in Russia somewhere. I'm not sure the exact location.
It's in the Ural Mountains in Russia, northern Russia. Yep.
Okay. They came up dead.
Yeah.
But no one knows really what happened to them. The circumstances are very strange. How they found them is very strange. Leads to some things, but then it doesn't make sense. So we're gonna get into that, talk about that tonight.
That's right.
The gist of it, like we said, was 10 hikers actually, went up into the mountains. Not sure if this was just a fun trip for them, or if they were trying to do some studying, or what the deal was. I know it was really, really bad. Really, the winter weather was extremely harsh at the time, but
it's Siberia.
They were prepared for it, obviously. The thing that got me was the fact that, they're up there in temperatures, Fahrenheit anyway, well below zero. And, they were able to stay warm enough at night somehow, some way. I don't know how you do it. Is it your clothing? Do you just huddle around a fire? How do you stay warm in those temperatures? I can't stay outside for 10 minutes shoveling snow when it's that cold.
Yeah,
how do these guys?
And they're at sub-zero temperatures.
I mean,
30 below.
What makes someone say, "Well, hey, it's 10 below out. Let's go on a week hike trek up into the Siberian mountains"? I don't know, but they did. For whatever reason, they did.
Mm-hmm.
It says in January 1959, 23-year-old hiker Igor Dyatlov led a journey.
It's Igor.
Igor Dyatlov. You say Igor, I say Igor. His last name was
tomato. Whatever.
Yeah, his last name was Dyatlov, so that's kind of why they named it after him, I guess.
Yep.
He led a journey to reach the peak of Ortnin. I guess that's how you say it. A mountain in the northern Urals of Soviet Union. So these guys were just mountain climbing.
Mm-hmm.
The young man brought a team of 8 experienced hikers, many from Ural Polytechnical Institute, along with him for the adventure. So this was kind of like a college excursion kind of thing. Before he left, Dyatlov had told his sports club that he and his team would send a telegram as soon as they returned. But that telegram was never sent, and none of the hikers of the so-called Dyatlov Pass incident were ever seen alive again.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
When their bodies were found in the coming weeks, their strange and gruesome injuries left investigators baffled and repulsed. Some were missing eyes, another was missing their tongue, and many were struck by a force comparable to that of a speeding car, but no one can make sense of it. Mm-hmm. They said they were talking about when they found their bodies, they were scattered out within a mile of their tent. They found them in different locations, some together, some not. Some were like laying in a stream. Their bodies had been crushed. You want to say that it kind of points to an avalanche, but the details in the story don't add up to that.
Mm-hmm.
If an avalanche would have hit them, they would have never saw it coming.
No.
They would have never left
buried in the tent. Yep.
They did find these bodies. They were partially buried, but not completely buried. They weren't in deep, deep snow. Snow had drifted over them. But they also found footprints leaving the tent. So if an avalanche would have come along, it would have covered those footprints, no problem.
And they didn't just leave the tent. They cut their way out of the tent.
They did, which was very strange.
Yeah.
Why
they
would
didn't
you do
leave
that?
by the door. They left through the side.
They cut a big hole. Yeah, big holes in the side of this tent to get out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's because, I don't know if they had zippers back then. I'm guessing they did. I think that the entrance to the tent was, they weren't able to get it open, unable to untie the strings. They were frozen shut, something like that. But why the hell did they get out of the tent?
Or something was at the door.
Or something was at the door. Why would they get out of the tent? You know?
No. Yeah, panic, half clothed even.
Yeah, I want to say that it leads to hypothermia. But again, these guys have been up there for days in this temperature. Why all of a sudden do they get hypothermia?
Now all of a sudden it hits them? No.
The Soviet government disclosed the Dyatlov Pass case quickly and offered only thin explanations, saying that the hikers died to hypothermia because they were inexperienced and that maybe something like an avalanche was at fault. I don't
see that right there is contradictory because in the first paragraph it said they were 8 experienced hikers.
Yeah,
and then the Soviet government says they were inexperienced.
There's definitely cover up in this.
Yeah. So that right there is the first red flag.
Well, people want to say that the government did this. They were testing some nuclear things. And
Yeah, some kind of nuke thing, but
it still doesn't explain why they didn't have any clothes on.
Nope.
To me, the only thing that explains why they were taking their clothes off was because of hypothermia. But that doesn't make sense because they'd been up there for days. I mean, unless it finally got to them.
Because they were in the tent already, and they're probably warm in the tent.
I think, if their clothes weren't on, it was because they were already asleep in their sleeping clothes, or not clothes, sleeping, which I'd have all my
In
clothes
their
on,
sleeping bags. Yeah.
no matter how cold it was. But something happened. It startled them. They got up. They couldn't get out of the tent. They cut their way out. I don't know.
Right.
It was really weird.
Right.
Let's keep reading on. So the government says that they were inexperienced and that maybe something like an avalanche was at fault. And there wasn't no avalanche. If you see some documentaries where they were setting, there was no big. They were kind of on a slope, but there's nothing like a big mountaintop range way above them that any snow could have come down from. It was angled enough to where it was just kind of like, that it's like you're going to sled down this slope, not have an avalanche come barreling down. With the avalanche explanation clearing up almost none of the lingering questions, amateur sleuths have been puzzled over the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass for 60 years. While the Russian government did reopen the case in 2019, we still don't know exactly what happened on that snowy mountainside all of those years ago. Based on what was recovered from the cameras and diaries discovered at the site of the hikers' deaths, investigators were able to piece together that on February 1st, the team began to make their way through the unnamed pass leading to Ortanen. As they pushed through the hostile climate toward the base of the mountain, they were hit with snowstorms that ripped through the narrow pass. Decreasing visibility caused the team to lose their sense of direction, and instead of moving toward Ortanen, they accidentally deviated west and found themselves on the slope of a nearby mountain. The mountain is known as, I'll try to say this, Kolatskyle, meaning dead mountain in the language of the indigenous Mansai people of the region. So, I heard that too. They were on a trail. They were on a set trail.
Yeah. I mean, it was a marked path.
So people know this. There was actually another gentleman that was up there with them, and he turned around midway for some reason. I think he was getting sick. And he, till the day, I don't know if he's still alive, till the day he died, he regretted not knowing what happened to his friends. These guys were all friends. They were all close. They weren't just nobodies who didn't know anyone from anywhere. They knew each other really well. They were very close friends. That's another reason they decided to do this. This guy who comes back, I remember him saying that he told investigators, I guess, that, they were going along a trail that they knew that was there. They said they came across a hunter's footprints. And because of the weather, they decided to follow his footprints, thinking that he was going to lead them to, a house or a cabin or something warmer that they could get out of the elements with. So I think they became lost in that sense.
It could be.
And I don't know if those were hunters' footprints that they saw, but they got lost.
Well, they were somebody's footprints. Things' footprints.
To avoid losing the altitude they had gained, or perhaps simply because the team wanted to practice camping on a mountain slope before the ascent, Dyatlov called for the camp to be made there. It was on a solitary mountainside that all 9 hikers of the Dyatlov Pass incident would meet their demise. When February 20th rolled around, there was still no communication from the hikers and a search party was mounted. The volunteer rescue force that trekked through the Dyatlov Pass found the campsite but no hikers. So the military and police investigators were sent in to determine what happened to the missing team. When they arrived on the mountain, the investigators weren't hopeful. Though the group was made up of experienced hikers, the route they had chosen was remarkably difficult, and accidents on these tricky mountain trails were a real danger. With the hikers having been missing for so long, investigators expected to find an open and shut case of horrific accident on treacherous ground. They were only partially correct.
See, and they just said it again, too. Experienced hikers.
Yeah, the government's definitely covering something up here.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know why.
I don't either.
They found bodies, yet in the states where the bodies were found only raised more questions. The discoveries of the bodies opened up the true mystery of the Dyatlov Pass incident that continues to this day. When the investigators arrived at the campsite, the first thing they noticed was the tent had been cut open in a way that soon proved to be from the inside and that it was nearly destroyed. Meanwhile, most of the team's belongings, including several pairs of shoes, had been left there at the camp. Yeah, why would you leave your tent? So
that tells me they were bedded down for the night. They were, they had the shoes off already.
Yeah. This is one big tent, right? They were sleeping in one big tent, 9 people.
Yeah.
All curled up, keeping warm. For some reason, they got up, all of them, every single one of them with that tent, right?
Yeah. No
shoes, a lot of them no shoes, a lot of them no clothes, like no pants. They're sleeping. Again, I wouldn't be sleeping without pants on in the mountains. Period.
I wouldn't either. I'd be fully clothed. Yeah.
But maybe they got warm enough. But for some reason, they cut their way out of this tent. They didn't go out the front or the back. They didn't unzip or untie the flap. They hastily cut open this tent. And again, I want to say it's because they couldn't open the flaps. Maybe they were frozen. Maybe the tie strings. But you tie them on the inside or you zip it. I can see a zipper getting frozen. I don't know if they had zippers.
Yeah, but I don't know if they had zippers back
59. Then. It's possible, but I don't know. But just that in itself doesn't make any damn sense, period. If you're going to leave a tent...
I'm thinking something or someone was at the door of that tent.
If I'm going to leave a tent and I can't get it open, I'm going to just cut a slit down that zipper side, right? And flap it out. That way I can still kind of close it. And I'm definitely going to put my clothes and my shoes on if I'm walking out in the snow.
Unless, again, they were in a panic for their lives or something.
For them to cut that tent open means that they had no choice, or they knew that their demise was close. Because once you cut that tent open, you have no shelter.
Yeah, you're done. Yeah.
They still had to hike back. They would have had to stop and sleep somewhere.
Yeah.
Very strange stuff.
And if they would have destroyed their tent, where are they going to sleep?
Very strange stuff. I don't get it. I would understand if it said it was cut from the outside. Someone cutting it open to get to them. But it wasn't.
But it wasn't. They cut themselves out.
They know that for a fact. But the way the fibers were going, they could tell the cut was made from the inside.
Yep.
They discovered 8 or 9 sets of footprints from the team, many of them clearly made by people with either nothing, socks, or a single shoe on their feet. These tracks led to the edge of the nearby woods almost a mile away from the camp. Why would you walk, run, whatever, in bare feet a mile away from your tent? Unless you were running from something. And like we said, an avalanche doesn't make sense because an avalanche isn't going to just slowly start, oh, here comes an avalanche, let's get the hell out of here. No.
Yeah, they'd have never made it out of the tent.
They'd never know what hit them. But where they were on the mountainside, I don't see where there could have been an avalanche come down and get them.
No, there wasn't no avalanche.
The forest edge under a clear cedar, the investigators found 2 remains of a small fire in the first 2 bodies. Yuri Krivonoskninko, 23, and Yuri Doroshenko.
We'll have to work on our Russian.
Yeah. Despite temperatures of -13 to -22 Fahrenheit on the nights of their deaths, both men's bodies were found shoeless and wearing only underwear. So they find these 2 dudes almost a mile away. No shoes,
No shoes, no pants.
Only underwear. They had a fire going by a tree. That doesn't make any sense at all.
Mm-mm.
So, in my mind, they were made to leave their tent without time to grab anything. They had to escape for some fast reason, right? Probably.
Yep.
These guys take off for this tree for cover. Maybe they're hiding. Maybe they decide they can start a fire to keep warm, but a fire would give them away if they're hiding from something. So I just don't understand this.
I don't either. None of this makes sense.
Then they found the next 3 bodies, those of Dyatlov, Zenata, Kolmogorova, 22, Rustim Slobodin, 23, who died on their way back to the camp from the cedar tree. So they're saying that these 3 people were coming back from the cedar tree toward the tent, the way their bodies were facing, like they were coming back from it. So maybe at some point, most or more of them were all around this tree doing a fire. Something made them get out of that tent, run hastily away without grabbing anything, and tried to curl up under this tree and get a fire going to keep warm.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, you would think that they would say, well, if we start a fire, whatever's after us is going to get us anyway. I mean, it's going to know we're here. But maybe they thought they could get away with it, or maybe they thought they could use fire as a weapon.
A deterrent, maybe like, fire, keep wolves and stuff away at night, supposedly.
Yeah. They didn't find any footprints of any animals around this.
Mm-mm.
There was only human footprints, and the only ones that they could detect were, the footprints belonged to the people that died.
Mm-hmm. So they're saying.
While the circumstances were odd, investigators found that the causes of death were clear. All hikers, they said, had perished from hypothermia. Their bodies showed no indication of severe external damage beyond what had been inflicted by the cold. Well, that's not true, because they said that 3 of them
some were crushed. Some had their eyes gone. One tongue was gone.
Again,
see, it's nothing makes sense in this story at all.
No.
Coming from the Russian government.
No. I mean, if it was an avalanche, I could see rocks and boulders hitting people like that, but they were the only ones. There was only certain ones that had those tragedies. Mm-hmm. Again, there was no way this to happen by an avalanche. They would have been covered in feet and feet and feet and feet of snow. The tent would have been covered. The tent would have been covered in snow. They found a flashlight laying on top of the tent after the fact.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been there.
Somebody came back and just threw the flashlight on the tent. I'm not sure if it still worked or not. So they say their bodies had shown no indication of severe external damage, what had been inflicted by the cold. I can see that if they had to get out of their tent, they had no clothes, they were rushed out, they just took off for whatever reason, something made them scatter, that eventually they would die of hypothermia. The tent was cut open, they had no way to get warm. Mm-hmm. I can see that happening, but there's still way too many circumstances that don't lead to that.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't add up.
It says this doesn't explain, the body's been inflicted by the cold, doesn't explain why Doroshenko was brown-purple in complexion, or why he had gray foam coming from his right cheek and a gray liquid coming from his mouth. I didn't know that.
Interesting.
Furthermore, this didn't explain why the hands of the 2 hikers under the cedar were scraped away and the branches above them were torn down, as if the 2 men had tried desperately to seek shelter from something or someone in the tree.
Interesting.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Slobodin had head injuries consistent with someone falling and hitting their head over and over again. And Kolmogorova had baton-shaped bruise on her side. These 2 hikers, as well as the others found by this point, were also generally underdressed and wearing some of each other's clothes, only supporting the idea that they had fled suddenly and without inadequate preparation into the freezing night, despite being experienced hikers.
They say it again, experienced hikers.
Yeah. Yeah, this is baffling. It wasn't until the other 4 bodies were found 2 months later that the mystery deepened even more. The remaining hikers were discovered buried under the snow in a ravine 75 meters deeper into the woods than the cedar, known as the Dyatlov Pass Den, and their bodies told even more gruesome stories than those of the other members in the group. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this guy's name, but his first name was Ikolai. Suffered significant skull damage in the moments before his death, while Ludmila Ludmila, and Semyon Zataryov had major chest fractures that could only have been caused by an immense force compared to that of a car crash.
Now, I'm pretty sure an avalanche ain't going to do that.
It could.
It's definitely not going to carry him 75 more meters into the damn woods.
We know it didn't hit him in the tent because it got out of the tent. And we know there's footprints leading from the tent. If an avalanche would have came down, it would have covered all that. They would have been covered even deeper.
Yep.
And the repetitiveness, talking about the head injury, the repetitive sounds like he was being, these people sound like they were brutally
They're being beaten.
murdered.
Yeah, or stomped or something.
I can see an avalanche causing that if rocks and stuff hit you, but
Just smash into a boulder.
the thing that cracks me up is they say,
Or
well,
a
could have been,
tree.
you know when an avalanche has happened, do you not? I mean, scientists can tell when an avalanche has happened.
Yeah.
They didn't say, yes, I know an avalanche happened here. I can
Usually
see it.
avalanche takes out all the trees and everything. So,
One big enough to do enough damage like that anyway.
Yep,
It definitely will wipe the tent out.
for sure.
In the most gruesome part of the Dyatlov Pass incident, Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips, as well as facial tissue and a fragment of her skull bone.
Avalanches do that.
They also found the body of Alexander Kolevatov in the same location, but without the same kind of wounds. The second group of bodies suggested that the hikers had died at distinctly different times because they appeared to have been making use of clothes of people who died before them. Interesting.
Yeah.
Dubinina's foot was wrapped in a piece of Krivenchenko's wool pants. Zolotarov was found in Dubinina's faux fur coat and hat, suggesting that he had taken them from her after she had died, just as she had taken clothes from Krivnichenko earlier. I apologize for the pronunciation of these names. Perhaps the most mysterious of all was that the clothes of both Kolevatov and Dubinina showed evidence of being radioactive. Due to evidence like this, even with more bodies found, the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass incident only grew more baffling. This just gets more confusing as we go along. I wanted to say, I'll say this. I don't know what made them get out of the tent. I wanted to say that they all probably died of hypothermia and that something came along, like some birds or something, and ate their tongues and eyes out, just the people that they chose to pick on. But I can't say that.
I don't think so.
I can't say that because some of them were crushed.
Birds don't beat people to death.
Right. The Soviet government closed the case quickly and gave only vague causes of death and speculated that the hikers' own incompetence may have caused their demises, that natural disaster was a culprit. Or that a natural disaster was a culprit.
No.
Sounds like the Soviet government's just about as bad as our government. Early on,
All governments are bad, man.
I believe it.
They're always going to lie to us.
Early on, many Soviets also suspected that the hikers' deaths were a result of an ambush by the local Mansi tribemen. A sudden attack would account for the way the hikers fled their tents, the disarray and damage done to the second group of bodies.
That's not true either, because those people helped look for those hikers.
Yeah, it says here, the Mansi people were largely peaceful, and the evidence of the Dyatlov Pass didn't much support violent human conflict. For one, the damage done to the hikers' bodies exceeded the blunt force trauma that one human could inflict on another. Okay? So they weren't killed by a person.
Nope.
There was also no evidence of any footprints on the mountain besides those made by the hikers themselves.
Interesting.
Investigators then conceived on a swift, violent avalanche. The sound of snow collapsing and early warning of the deluge to come would have frightened the hikers out of their tents in a state of undress and sent them spring for the tree line. An avalanche would have also been powerful enough to inflict the injuries that killed the second group of hikers. Okay, makes some kind of sense. But again, it says here, but the physical evidence of an avalanche just wasn't there. And locals familiar with the terrain later said that such a natural disaster simply wouldn't have made sense in the Dyatlov Pass. Yeah, the landscape wasn't set up for an avalanche there. It's not. It's not like there was a big, huge overhang mountain or whatever above them holding all this snow. They were kind of in a valley, kind of that went upward. But there's like, they could have went up another quarter mile, half a mile, and been on top of this ridge line. I don't see where there's could have been accumulated a bunch of snow there. It wouldn't have happened there.
Right.
Based on what I've seen on TV. Obviously, I wasn't there. I don't know. I haven't been there. I'm not going to go there. Unless.
Yeah, but I mean, like you said, even when you see it on TV, you know that there's no way.
Yeah, if the listeners are really interested in this and they want to check this out, there's a couple documentaries out there you can search for.
Yeah, they're out there.
I don't remember the name of them, but there's a couple good ones out there. Still, there's no answer to them.
Even that Expedition Unknown did a Dyatlov Pass.
Oh, did they?
Episode, yeah.
Is that William Shatner?
No. Josh Gates.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking of the Unexplained.
Unexplained, yeah. I think that was on there too. He talked about it too.
He probably did.
Mm-hmm.
It says here, moreover, no avalanches had been recorded on that site before and nor have been ever since.
How about that? So there was a one-off avalanche that just happened to wipe out 9 people.
Yep.
I don't think so.
It says, some tried to explain the hiker's strange behavior and lack of clothing with an in-depth look at the effects of hypothermia. Irrational thinking and behavior is a common early sign as a victim approaches death, that they may paradoxically perceive themselves to be overheating, causing them to remove their clothes. We've heard of that before.
Yeah.
The trauma to the second group of bodies in this version of events is caused by a stumbling plunge over the edge of a ravine. Yet hypothermia doesn't explain why the hikers left their warm tents in a panic for the frigid world outside in the first place.
Nope.
Other investigators began to test the theory that the deaths were a result of some argument among the group that got out of hand, possibly related to a romantic encounter. There was a history of dating between several of the members that could explain some of the lack of clothes. But people who knew the ski group said they were largely harmonious. I mean, there's no way that 9 people are going to get mad at each other enough to kill each other like that. That's just ridiculous.
No.
And
that's crazy.
It even said the force that was hit with these people could not have been caused by human hand.
Yep.
So we don't think it was humans. We don't think it was an avalanche. What the hell happened?
Well, first of all, even if you're fighting amongst yourselves, you're not going to cut the side of the tent to get out.
No. No, unless you're just a dick.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You want to piss everybody off, but you're all going to die. So what the hell?
Yeah. So I don't think that's not even a possibility.
It says, with humans effectively ruled out as culprits behind the Dyatlov Pass incident, though there were theories that the KGB or murderous prison escapees were at fault, some began to believe non-human assailants. Some began to claim that the hikers were killed by a mink, a kind of Russian yeti, to the account for the immense force and power necessary to cause the injuries to the 3 hikers.
Interesting.
So they talk about the pictures taken on their cameras, and there's a picture on this thing. And they've shown this a lot, where like one of the last photos is a picture of a figure standing in the tree line.
Behind a tree, kind of half behind and half standing out. Yeah.
And you don't know if one of the people.
Right. And you can't really tell what it is or who it is, but it is, you can tell it's a figure.
There's speculation that these folks were killed by Bigfoot, by a Yeti, or maybe a group of them. Or maybe some of them were killed by them and some of them fled and died of hypothermia. I would assume the ones that had the traumatic injuries to their chests and whatnot in their heads would have been the result of something.
Getting caught. Mm-hmm.
So that's out there too. I think they brought up the fact of aliens.
Yep.
Something like that. It just doesn't make any sense no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, it doesn't. None of it does. None of it adds up.
I still want to believe the avalanche, but I just don't. I don't see it.
Yeah, there's no way. Nope.
So the theory about the Yeti is popular among those who focus on the damage to Dubinina's face, while most explain her missing tissue by positing a visit from small scavengers or perhaps decay resulting from her partial submersion underwater, undertow stream. Mink proponents see a more sinister predator at work. So they call this thing a mink, a Yeti.
M-E-N-K.
Never heard that before.
M-E-N-K, not
Mank.
M-I-N-K.
Mank. Other sleuths point to the reports of a small amount of radiation detected in some of the bodies, leading to the wild theory that the hikers had been killed by some sort of secret-active radiation weapon or stumbling into the secret government testing.
Yeah, that was another one of the theories that they had on one of the shows, was that the Russian government was testing weapons, and it was one that went off in the air that didn't hit the ground. So they said that was that. could have caused it too. But I don't.
Yeah,
I don't think
but
so.
well, they would have still cut their tin open after it blew up. I mean, something made them cut their tin open.
Yeah, wouldn't those native people that they were talking about? Wouldn't they have heard that? Wouldn't they have seen that flash?
Yeah,
Wouldn't they have, you know.
I'm not going with that theory one bit.
No.
You know? Those who favor this idea stress the strange appearance of the bodies at their funerals. The corpses had slightly orange, withered cast, but had radiation been the cause of death, more than modest levels would have registered in the bodies when they were examined. The corpse's orange hue isn't surprising given the frigid conditions which they sat for weeks. They're partially mummified in the cold. So it took them weeks to find these guys?
Yeah.
They were supposed to message back, and they never got the message. And then they got worried. And then they went out. By the time they got out to look for him, it had been, a couple weeks after that, I'm assuming.
Probably, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The secret weapon explanation is popular because it is partially supported by the testimony of another hiking group, one camping 50 kilometers from the Dyatlov Pass team on the same night. This other group spoke of a strange orange orbs floating in the sky around Saikal, a site proponents of the theory interpret as distant explosions. Orbs. Strange orbs. Maybe that's where the alien thing comes in.
Maybe. But it's definitely not a secret weapon from the Russians.
No, that's impossible. There would have been result of that. You'd have seen evidence of that.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Trees and other things would have been blown away.
Mm-hmm.
Other explanations include drug testing that caused violent behavior in the hikers and an unusual weather event known as infrasound. Interesting.
There you go.
Caused by particular wind patterns that can lead to panic attacks in humans because the low-frequency sound waves create a kind of earthquake inside the body. Where have we heard that before? Infrasound. In the end, the hikers' deaths were officially attributed to a compelling natural force, and the case was closed.
A compelling natural force.
Oh, shit. It's like saying, well,
that's good enough.
They died.
Case closed.
They're dead because they died.
That's right. In the snow. So there you go. It was the cold that killed them.
I mean, even if you didn't know the answer to this, you know what I'm saying? If you didn't know the answer to this, you'd think you wouldn't make up crazy theories. Well, this is what happened. We'd just say, I don't know. We don't know.
Mm-hmm. We don't know what happened. And people in Russia, I mean, I don't know how it is anymore, but back then they couldn't question it. You know, once the government said what they said, people couldn't question it or they'd disappear. You know, back then. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it still is like that or not. I'm sure it is.
It says officials said they would only consider 3 theories: an avalanche, a snow slab, or a hurricane.
A hurricane.
In Russia, in the mountains.
Makes total sense, yeah.
And the case was once again closed with only a vague conclusion to that no criminal activity was afoot. Investigators said in July 2020 that the hikers died of hypothermia after an avalanche of similar force pushed them out of the tent into the cold. Still, the mystery remains unofficially solved.
Yeah, that's not. I'm not buying that.
I don't believe any of that.
Nope.
They were killed by something other than themselves, and I don't think it was a natural disaster type thing. I think they would have seen evidence of that. Again, where they were on that mountainside, above them wasn't a lot of terrain. It was just kind of a slope. Again, an avalanche would have wiped them out immediately.
Yes.
If they thought they heard an avalanche coming, maybe. I don't know if you can hear one coming. Can you tell? They're experienced hikers. They're not going to set camp up on a mountain where they know they can get an avalanche.
I think you can. I mean, I watched the documentary about the one of the avalanches that hit the Everest expedition. Remember that one?
Yeah.
It was a while back. And they heard it coming. They heard the rumble. But it's almost instant. Once you hear it, you got like 30 seconds. And you're dead.
Yeah, so explain to me how, let's say it did happen. Let's say they heard rumbling. They didn't have time to unzip and put this on. They cut their shit and got out of there. Let's say that happened. Let's just say.
Okay.
It still doesn't explain why some people were over by a tree with a fire.
Right.
Some people were by a stream crushed. Mm-hmm. How can the people that were by the stream crushed way down? How come the guys by the tree, by the stream crushed? How come the guys by the tree didn't get crushed? How come the other bodies found between them?
Yeah, none of that
didn't show those 3 bodies showed traumatic injuries to their chest and head.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense.
The other ones didn't. They said they died of hypothermia. Well, they said everybody died of hypothermia, but it just doesn't add up to me.
Mm-mm.
So, the theory of the Bigfoot, maybe it's true. Maybe Bigfoot comes around. Maybe there's a clan of them. Maybe they don't like them in their area, and maybe they scare the shit out of them and do them in. Maybe those guys are trying to climb a tree, trying to hide to get away, start a fire. Who knows? I thought...
Now, this could have been an accumulation of maybe, before this happened, maybe these, whatever it was, tried to scare them away, and then they wouldn't leave. And then something escalated, just kept escalating. And then finally they just attacked.
Yeah, very possible. And I thought I read or saw in the documentary that one of the bodies down by the tree where the fire was had been burnt. Like his leg was kind of charred, where he had just kind of died and fell into the fire, or his leg was kind of laying on the fire. I don't know.
Yeah, that's wild.
Some died by hypothermia, supposedly. Some died by blunt force trauma. You want to say it leads to the avalanche, but it just doesn't make sense.
Nope.
Now, something like a bear or something like that coming in and killing them all off, or a group of bears or whatever, that kind of does. But they would have eaten them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wild animals would have torn them apart. And especially in the winter. Yeah.
I do think that the lady's missing tongue and eyes were probably after the fact. Some kind of birds or something coming up, and
maybe
other little critters, but it just doesn't add up to me. What's your theory? You got anything on it?
No. Short of what we just talked about, no.
It's interesting.
No, yeah. I know you can't believe the Russian government because that did not happen.
Yeah, that's the point. We're not
looking at the evidence. That didn't happen. We weren't there, obviously, but
I don't think we're getting all the evidence is the problem.
Yeah, you're probably right there.
Because if something or someone else would have caused this demise, there would have been evidence. There would have been footprints.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
They cover up the Yeti thing. If they thought that that's what happened, they wouldn't
absolutely
say that that's what they thought, because people would be out trying to kill and hunt these things down, or getting killed or whatever. They wouldn't admit that. Nope. But it strangely kind of makes sense if that's true. I believe that more than I do some of the other theories, strangely. So, but if anyone out there,
pretty wild.
If anyone out there has any thoughts on this or has their opinion, reach out to us and let us know what you think.
Let us know.
Get a hold of us. Shoot us an email.
That's right.
Let us know what you think.
Shoot us an email, or find us on Facebook. You find us on Instagram. You can, wherever. We're everywhere. In the meantime, maybe we'll come up with something and we'll keep checking into this. This one's really got me intrigued. I definitely want to dig into it more. Yeah, this one we're definitely going to follow up with. I know other people have in the past, but we're going to do our part. Brian, thank you for being here, man. Good hanging out with you. Always fun, every time. All right, until next time. Yep. See ya.